and I was thinking, well, Carol knows her pain. That's one of the things that she's witnessing as she's watching Lydia, is understanding her pain.
Hey guys, Kiwi here. In this video, I'll be breaking down discussing the characters Lydia and Carol going into Season 10 of The Walking Dead, as they both played a major role in the Season 9 finale. With that being said, major warning of spoilers for everything in the show up to the Season 9 finale, and let's jump right into this. So, during the entire episode, Lydia is showing signs of being dangerously depressed due to feeling guilty over the Pike deaths from the Whisper border at the end of the previous episode in 9:15. It's been a month or two since, and there's just sort of a depressed, awkward stigma in the air looming over everyone, especially considering that the kingdom has fallen for the winter and possibly forever. So, on the road, Alden gives Lydia a hard time about the Whispers watching them, and to be honest, he kinda has some nerve doing this considering he was once a savior prisoner himself. Even though he's been a model student since then, Daryl should have, put him in his place a bit more and reminded him of where he came from. I like Alden as a character, but this made me feel a bit sour towards him. Now, he did just become official with Enid at the fair or whatever, so he's understandably not happy having to follow the rules of the Whisper border after they marked the border with his girlfriend's head. That being said, he's got to remember that Lydia's new boyfriend Henry was also killed in the same way by her mother, and Lydia also told her mom off, so it's not like she wanted any of this. Holding Lydia responsible for the actions of Alpha and the Whispers would be similar to holding Alden responsible for the actions of Negan and the Saviors. That being said, Alden is just one of many situations where I assume people have been acting very rude or passive-aggressive towards Lydia and just kind of excluding her and alienating her just because she's a former member of the Whispers, even though she's a victim as well.
Is that them? People watching us now, huh? Only followed their rules. Haven't they done enough to us?
Hi. To lay off.
Lydia sees the way that everyone looks at her, and she even explains this during her conversation with Daryl. Lydia feels like everyone hates her, but she also feels like they deserve to, or they're right to, as Lydia even blames herself for all of their loved ones dying. Now, how much Lydia is exactly responsible or guilty for any of this is debatable. Lydia did play a factor in all of this, but what's she gonna do? Not accept, repeated help? Like, she did go back with the Whispers in the first place, but then people just kept offering to help her, and she wants help, so she's going to get away because she knows that her mom's way of things isn't right. But yeah, she even went back just to sort of save the hilltop and the kingdom and everyone, even though she didn't want to go back with Alpha. She went back even though Henry was telling her not to, and then Enid came and confronted them or whatever because Lydia and Henry went and run off to go hide. But at the end of the episode, Lydia did stand up and say, you know what, I need to go back with my mom because it's not right that I'm here. I don't want my mom to, kill all these people and do something horrible. But they just kept going after Lydia and wanting to help her out, so is it really Lydia's fault? Lydia being captured and brought to the hilltop did set off a butterfly effect of chain reactions that eventually caused the Pike border, but there were so many other variables as well, she can't entirely blame herself. She is being way too hard on herself in the Season 9 finale. First off, what are the odds that they'd even capture the daughter to the leader of the Whisperers anyways? They could have captured any of them and they just so happened to capture her. And although I feel bad about Henry's death, especially because of what it's done to Carol and Ezekiel and everything involving the kingdom, Henry did run off like an idiot and get himself into trouble multiple times when people told him not to. Lydia even called him an idiot, and he put himself in harm's way, and he jeopardized multiple communities. And just because Henry did it for Lydia, just because he had good intentions, does not mean that Lydia should necessarily be held responsible. And even though Henry does have good intentions, he might cause something awful, even though, he was just trying to help. Lydia told him not to, and she insisted on him staying away, but he insisted on going after her, and he sort of went off on his own. He couldn't, and I mean, he's just such a pure person, like, he just only wanted to help because that's how he was raised, but he kind of needed to learn that some things were out of his control. Now, when they crossed the Whisper border in the season 9 finale, it was never intended, it was just something that they were forced to do for survival. Of course, Lydia takes a moment to stare at Henry's pike, refreshing the guilt that we saw her feeling when she visited his pike originally after Daryl brought her out there for the final scene in episode 9:15. And then the next thing we see with Lydia in the episode gets right in our face as she tries to kill herself by allowing a zombie to bite her in the arm. This is possibly because she would have preferred becoming a walker, as she was raised as a whisperer among zombies her entire life, and they have this idea where even if they die, they'll become a zombie and they'll become the guardians of their own herd, staying with them even if they aren't technically alive anymore. It's almost like the whisperers have their own belief or religion, and I don't know if we're going to see that explored more in season 10, but we did get that alluded to us in the beginning of that one episode when Beta was talking to that guy who was bitten, and then we later see him as a zombie, a part of the Whisper herd. And as a side note, I thought that the stuck zombie that Lydia found reminded me a lot of the one that Carl found in season 2, which later killed Dale as Carl aggravated it, didn't kill it, and unintentionally led it back to Herschel's farm. I thought that they might have played it off like this in the episode during the season 9 finale a bit more, and they didn't, but it was still a nice throwback. Now, in this moment of Lydia attempting suicide, Carol catches her in the act, and so she pauses and stops, but then the camera just sort of cuts to them walking back. I feel like Carol should have talked to her here, and we should have seen it, but I guess, Carol sort of understands what Lydia is going through, so she doesn't freak out at her, she just brings her back. It's worth mentioning that comic book Carol was actually suicidal enough to do this to herself during the prison arc, which would have been back in season 3, and it's actually her daughter Sophia that's lived on into the new beginning in the comics, adopted by Glenn and Maggie, although Glenn obviously isn't around anymore. Now, I feel like we should have seen Carol have a talk with Lydia about this when she originally caught her in the act, and maybe there was a deleted scene of it or something, but it seemed a little bit lackluster because later on, Carol notices Lydia wandering off on her own again, and considering she just caught her attempting to commit suicide, we can assume that she's going to try again. I feel like Carol should have talked to her after finding what she was doing the first time, instead of waiting for her to run off the second time. And even then, when she does find her the second time, Lydia does like 99% of the talking, but we'll get to that. So Carol saw Lydia run off, and she tells Daryl that she'll handle it, as she can probably guess what Lydia's up to. So she finds Lydia in this little barn in the woods, and she's standing there with some sort of metal skewer pointed at herself.
Pulling her away from that again, and then in the little barn in the woods when Lydia runs off and Carol finds her, and she's asking Carol to please take my life, end it for me. You won't have to suffer anymore. If I'm gone, you don't lose any more people. Carol has been there before.
This is where we get the big Lydia and Carol confrontation, which caused a lot of different thoughts to happen all at once. First off, during a certain point in Lydia's speech, Carol was definitely considering it, as I feel like Lydia almost convinced her of it. Carol is finally forced to confront Lydia about this after a few months of just sort of keeping her distance, so with all the emotions that she's been holding back of Henry, it's probably flooding through her mind right now. Carol could be capable of killing Lydia, just think back to the whole look at the flowers lily moment, so that's not necessarily the factor here, it's just, what Lydia says that makes Carol go, it just kind of has a huge range of emotions for her. I feel like it goes from her almost doing it to actually changing her mind and then taking Lydia back with her, because Lydia starts rambling at this point, saying anything to convince Carol that she deserves to die. While doing this, she states that she's weak, just like Alpha, her mother, told her that she was. She's telling Carol this in a way where she really seems to have taken to heart her last confrontation with Alpha during the end of episode 9:15.
I'm too weak. Just like my mother said.
You're not weak. Come on, we have to go.
It wasn't Alpha's choice, she's just mad because Lydia didn't want to come back with her. Alpha actually misses Lydia and wants her back, and that's why she ends up killing that one Whisperer in 9:15, because she was caught showing emotion, but check out my full video about that for more detail. Another thought is how Carol didn't want to agree with Lydia, not only because, well, what she's saying is wrong, but also because it's Alpha's opinion. The last thing Carol wants to do is take the side of someone who killed her son and enable what she told Lydia. Also, Carol wants to be better than Alpha. Alpha killed her child, so if she kills Alpha's child, she kind of becomes no better, even if it is for revenge.
So in a big way, this is like Carol listening, having a dialogue with her own self, seeing herself in Lydia and saying, what would the adult Carol say to the little one if she knew what you know now? That kind of conversation.
When Lydia is saying how she's weak because Alpha told her so, Carol also thinks back to how her abusive husband used to tell her that she was weak as well, so she relates to Lydia in this way too. We all know that Carol is one of the strongest characters on the show, like she's a crazy killing machine, especially ever since they left the prison, so she doesn't want to hold Lydia down and have her believe that, well, what Alpha's telling her is true, since Carol was put down for so long during the pre-apocalypse years. Another thought is how Daryl told Alpha that they would keep Lydia safe and give her a better life, so if Carol killed Lydia, Daryl would be pissed and so would Alpha. It would defeat the purpose of Daryl telling Alpha literally at the end of the last episode that they'll be able to provide Lydia with a better life than Alpha can, proving that Alpha and her ways of the Whispers are wrong. Speaking of which, I might create a separate discussion talking about Daryl becoming Lydia's guardian in season 10, let me know what you guys think. People also think that Daryl and Lydia might start a relationship, and I just can't take that seriously. Whether people are just kidding or if they actually think that, the thought of it just feels weird to me, as it seems like they have the type of parental figure bond that a protector or guardian would have over the person that they're looking after. Daryl and Lydia feel like they have a family bond that's being created, and hopefully Carol can learn to get along and work as a team in the future as well, because they're all going to need to put their heads together to defeat Alpha's potential threat going into season 10, especially considering her mega herd.
You don't have to protect me. I know how they feel about me.
No, don't mean they get to talk to you like that.
I don't cause any more problems.
It's their problem, not yours.
Now, not too sure how long Lydia will survive in the world of The Walking Dead, as it's a real wild card to have her survive longer than Henry, considering that she was originally a supporting character for Carl in the comics, who Henry was the replacement of in the TV show. Although it's different, I actually like it. They used Henry's character to its full potential by introducing Lydia and the Whispers into the story because of him, and then killing off Henry was not only a shocking and risky move, but it also projected multiple characters affected forward into future arcs like Carol, Ezekiel, and Lydia, along with the surrounding characters like Daryl and Alpha. Henry did a lot for the show, and although it's strange that Lydia has outlived him, I feel like it'll be a better situation than when Enid awkwardly outlived Carl, considering that Enid was Carl's supporting character. Lydia may just become a season 10 character and die during the Whisper War something near the end of the season, but she could become a series regular and get integrated into the main cast for the seasons to come. Once Lydia eventually gets her head straight, she could play an important role in the future, considering her ability to manipulate zombies to her advantage since she's been raised as a Whisper. What if she even led the mega herd away? Like, what if she saved the communities? Yes, we've all known about the guts trick since season 1, but if Lydia can use her strategies for us on the front lines, she could become a very valuable part of the team. She can even be used on the offensive. Leave any predictions and theories for Lydia going into season 10 down below, but bottom line, at least now that Lydia and Carol have confronted each other about Henry's death, they can try and move forward from it. I'm glad that the show cleared the air between them and that they wrapped up the internal conflict relatively quick instead of having it, spill into season 10 and drag on for way longer than necessary. Hopefully this will start to make things not awkward between them in the future, but what do you guys think? Will they be able to get along and work together against Alpha in the future? I'd appreciate a like on the video if you've enjoyed anything I've said today, and feel free to check out my Patreon and follow me on Twitter as well, where I'm always posting everything I can involving the Walking Dead universe, the links to both in the description. But anyways guys, as always, I thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out!
Just to snap out of it when she said my mother said I was weak. That's when, Carol is like, no, this was Ed saying the same thing to me. You're worth, you are worth so much more than this. And I have to remind myself as Carol too, So, no. Take my hand. Let's go. You're not weak.